Well, thanks for the opportunity, first of all. Giuseppe Geneletti with Whirlpool since 20 years and worked on innovation for a number of years in various capacities. Even though I don't have an academic background, I studied here at Bocconi many years ago, but I love the topic of innovation, so I'm very happy to be able to share some of the practitioner experience tonight with you, Mikkel, and with the people that are following us today on the webinar. Well, the first probably provocative answer is really coming from playing on the number that you just shared. If only 7% of the ideas survive, I hope that more than 7% of the people that had the ideas survived. That means that people don't like just to survive with small odds, and there is a natural resistance for people to associate themselves with innovations just because they know that there is a high likelihood of a failure, unfortunately. And even though most of us have heard probably somewhere the idea that companies need to learn to fail fast, for the people that are promoting the innovation, that are promoting the idea, that are requiring companies, their companies or their pockets to put the money down on the ideas, not necessarily it's easy to make the ideas fail because it's their reputation, it's their ego, it's their money that is at stake, and in large cases, it's number of jobs that are associated maybe with ventures and so on. So that's the first, let me say, dilemma and challenge people have with innovation. The fact that they do know it's risky propositions and not necessarily they want to survive in small odds, as we see here from your survey.
Can I ask you an elaborative question on this specific issue? So if I understand you right, you're kind of hinting at an answer that says it's not actually the relevant issue here. It's not only, or maybe not even, the number of ideas, but it's also linked to what actually happens to the people that suggest the ideas. And one of the problems why, not necessarily in terms of percentage of ideas, but in terms of solidity and quality of ideas, that in a lot of companies there is no career associated to be innovative.
I like the way the conversation is evolving, which is not very theoretical and not very much structured, but if we follow that line of discussion, the first thing that comes to mind is my personal experience many years ago when I was taken out of my very structured, very clear role of, at that time was called brand director for one of our brands in Europe, a very clear role, and put into one of these innovation teams with the goal that was totally unclear and very, clouded. At that time, with a number of other people in the organization, we were tasked to really create at the same time innovations for the company, but also an engine of innovation, so build a capability for the organization, both in our region and also globally. Well, one of the things that I remembered our president for the region did at the time was a letter that he sent and signed personally to all the 25 people that were taken out of their jobs and put into these teams, saying that no matter what, regardless of the outcome of our efforts, our jobs were safe. And there was a small sign of emotional, psychological empathy, organizational empathy, recognized that people were putting their careers, if you want, at stake, and their potential future success in the company by associating themselves with ventures that not necessarily were going to be successful. Indeed, this was very helpful for the people that participated in these efforts.
Okay. Well, thank you. So if one element is linked to, in academic jargon, I apologize for this, we would kind of associate with, broadly speaking, organizational incentive system to be involved in an innovation process, either as an individual or as part of participation. Is this the main difficulty you see in organizations for why it's difficult to manage the innovation process, or are there other elements that you could point to for difficulties, barriers to innovation and entrepreneurship in existing corporations?
Well, another typical barrier, from my experience, is the fact that it's relatively easy to come up with ideas. So the front end part, if it's based on deep consumer understanding, if it's based on clear insights, if it's based on a clear understanding of what type of consumers you're trying to serve, it's not so difficult. It's very easy for people to get in love with their initial creative idea. What happens though is that very rarely the same people, at least in larger organizations, the same people that have the ideas are able, have the skills, have the organizational mandate to carry those ideas forward. So differently than in smaller garage type of ventures, the people that have the ideas at one point in time, regardless of the process, stage gate, or whatever situations, they have somewhat to give their baby to somebody else. And in this transition, very often, the initial understanding, the personal drive, that real, specific understanding of the need that you're trying to solve gets somewhat lost. And it's difficult for people picking up the idea and carrying it forward through the organization to the various testing, experiment stages and so on, to have the same, let me say, drive as the initial originator. So one of the challenges for organizations is to make sure that these transition stages are well managed, that from one stage to the other, the idea is carried forward with the same level of intensity, understanding, and so on. So that's another challenge, I guess, that you have in larger organizations.
And still working on this this line of thinking, but you obviously, Whirlpool or you, Giuseppe Geneletti, you have identified this as a potential problem. And I would imagine that a lot of corporations that deals with innovation kind of identify this as an issue. So maybe it's a very naive question, but why does it happen then? Why is it that at a certain point the organizations need to take away the projects from the initial initiators, running the risk that the entrepreneurial drive, the passion that was surrounding the project in early phases get lost?
Innovations, at the way we define it, at least in Whirlpool, where it's general definitions, are not just creative ideas. They are things, as you said them before, business models, products, solutions, whatever, that create value. They create value for the consumers, the users, whatever stakeholders you are considering, and they create value for the organization, offering them, providing them to the markets. In order to create value, you not only have to have a great idea, a great solution, but you also have to have the skills, the capabilities, the competencies, practically speaking, the distribution channels, the brands, and all of those things that carry the idea into the market. If you don't have these assets, if you don't have these, as Gary Hamel used to call them core competencies, then it's very difficult to extract the value from the idea. If you don't have, we would say, the social network, the community to get the value from, then it's difficult to get the value out of the innovation and even to make it really become a big scale success. Well, in order to do this, then somehow, you have to leverage the existing organizational structure. And so the idea is to become part of somewhat the mainstream. Or, you have different models where you create, new companies, new ventures, and you manage them independently. But that's at least not the model that we use at Whirlpool. In Whirlpool, we have one global organization, and all of the new ideas, all the innovations have to, go to the market through, our channels, our way to achieve and reach the consumers. And so somewhere, the idea has to move into the mainstream of the organization. That's why it's important, there is no way out in that sense.
It's interesting because in academia or in research, these things has been kind of studied, and and I wanted to ask whether this is coherent with your experience in professional experience in Whirlpool, and it actually it goes maybe a little bit in contrast to what you're saying, because one of the things that have been mentioned in research is that one of the reasons why it's difficult for new projects to survive is, and it's linked to this taking away the project from the initial owners and putting them into a mainstream division, is that when you take a development project, so what is the nature of a typical development project from a financial perspective? It's typically a cash drainer. I mean, in early phases, an innovation project or a development project requires a lot of attention, but doesn't necessarily generate a lot of
it's
revenue.
Like a child.
It
takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, but if you move these projects inside existing product divisions or product categories, where business unit directors, business managers are measured on bottom line results, isn't there an incentive also from these business unit managers to neglect these innovation projects? So you're right. I can see the logic. So we need to leverage core competences. We cannot afford to have separated incubator structures or incubators. We need to take the projects from once they are mature or semi-mature, we need to integrate them into the existing business models. But then, and this is where some research point to this dilemma or this fact, then once you move them there, because they are still not a net contributor to business unit profit lines, they are neglected and they die. So I just wanted to your experience or your take on this noted dilemma from academia.
A couple of answers. It's absolutely correct. One way to overcome this implicit, challenge and conflict almost, is to have, as we usually say, and it's commonly talked about, top management endorsement. If you have the CEO of the company who's putting down sort of his weight on innovation, and as you said, establishes clear goals by business on revenues, or like in the case of Whirlpool, for instance, the two key measures that we use for innovation are margin contributor. So innovation projects have to be accretive on the average margin of every business, in which case they do get special capital attention. So there is a part of the capital allocated throughout the company which is dedicated to innovation. And the second one is the value of the pipeline. There is also a revenue, of course, coming from the pipeline which is accounted for, but really what we focus on a lot is the value of the pipeline by product categories and so on, by region, by brand and so on, which is the one also we communicate externally. The value of the pipeline of Whirlpool is a few $billion, and is the value of the future revenues that will come from the innovation in the early stages of the pipeline before they are launched. Well, if the CEO decides that every business has a specific goal and the businesses are measured on achievement or not of that goal with incentive schemes at the various levels and so on, then the existing business units do have a built-in incentive to also make somewhat room for these capital-intensive, cash-consuming, innovative businesses, I guess. So that's one way to go about, solving this issue.